I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. In today's episode, I'll be talking about how to set and achieve your reading goals. Plus, I'll also share some practical tips so you can take action today. So whether you hate making resolutions or you already know what you want to achieve, I think you'll find today's episode useful. So stay tuned. So I have a quick question to ask you. Have you ever thought about starting a reading habit? Or maybe you're a once in every blue moon type of reader, but you want to be more consistent and maintain a reading habit. Or maybe you're an avid reader, but you're interested in having a more intentional and fulfilling reading life. Does that sound like you? If any of those scenarios sound like you in even the slightest, I want to invite you to take the What's Your Reader Type quiz. It will only take 60 seconds of your time and you'll discover your reader type. But most importantly, you'll get the resources you need to start reading, maintain the habit, and get intentional. So visit readertypequiz.com. That's readertypequiz.com. It will only take you 60 seconds and you'll discover your reader type and get the resources you need. So whether you're an aspiring or avid reader, go to readertypequiz.com, spend 60 seconds and take the quiz that will help you get clear on where you are right now and what you need to do to live your best reading and literary life yet. Well, hello there and welcome to another episode of the Reader's Couch podcast. Today, I'll be talking about how to set and achieve your reading goals. Plus, I'll be sharing some practical tips so you can take action today. So whether you hate goal setting, you don't like setting resolutions, whether you have an idea of what you want to achieve, or you're still thinking about it, I think you'll find today's episode really useful. And the best part about it is that the principles I'm going to share with you today can be used in other areas of your life. So from your reading goals to your life goals and other more specific personal goals, I think these principles will help you get clear on what it is you want to achieve, but it will also help you to create a plan to achieve them. Because it's one thing to set a goal and want to achieve it, but there's no way you'll get there without a plan. So in today's episode, we're getting into setting our goals, creating a plan, and most importantly, crossing that finish line so we can say we achieved what we set out to do. So the first thing I really want us to get clear on are the meanings of different words you will hear, not just in today's episode, but in general, especially when we're talking about setting goals and making significant life changes. So the first one is resolution and resolutions. Now, I want us to get really clear and understand that a resolution is a decision you are making on a future outcome. It's a broad decision, and when you set a resolution, it's the commitment to an outcome. So, for example, you'll usually hear people saying at the start of any year, in this year, I want to live my best life. You know, that's a very broad decision. You're making the decision to live your best life. However, a goal is something completely different. Now, a goal is very specific, and this is where you're defining clearly your resolution. This is your what are you gonna do? Goals are definitely more tangible. So a goal is the definition of the outcome. So remember, the resolution is the commitment to an outcome. I want to live my best life. But the goal is the definition of the outcome. So what do you need to do to live your best life? So a goal could be to read a book a month. That is a very specific and tangible goal. One of our readers sent in an email and she was sharing with me her reading goal. Her name is Scarlett. I'm going to say Scarlett F. I'm not going to say her full name. But Scarlett's goal for 2023 is to read 20 books. So Scarlett's goal is very clearly defined. It's specific. She wants to read 20 books and she wants to accomplish this goal within the 12 months that are in the year. Now, the other thing I want us to get very clear on is intention, the word intentions. Now, the intentions are actually your why. It's the meaning, it's the reason behind your resolution and your goal. Now, an intention is kind of different because an intention doesn't stop at the final destination. This is where you're committing to the process. Because you know how folks always say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? That is what an intention is. So what's the deeper reason behind why, let's say, you want to read a book a month, right? Or your goal maybe is to read for 30 minutes every day. Why do you want to do that? That is your intention. So for me personally, when I actively started to focus more on reading and incorporating reading in my daily life, it was because I wanted to reduce my screen time. I found that I was just spending ridiculous amount of hours on social media and I wanted to reduce my screen time. So that for me is a deeper intention. So even though my goal is to read, let's just say every day, because I do read every day, but let's just work with a person who's just setting a reading goal and they're resolving to read for 30 minutes every day. And let's say they want to reduce screen time as well, or just not be on social media as much. That is their deeper intention. So even though they might achieve the goal of reading for 30 minutes a day, and you're like, yay, I achieved my goal today, right? It's not about the goal itself and the end. The intention is deeper, and this intention will keep driving you to read more every day. So it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey, and part of the journey is reducing your screen time. If you're like me, you might want to set an example in your family, you want to set an example for your children. That's a great intention. Another intention could be to slow down to help reduce your stress. And I have a whole podcast episode on slowing down and why that's important. And I really think you should give that a listen. That's episode 58. Talking about slowing down and taking a step back. That could be a deeper intention. Another intention could just be, you want to make friends. That is your goal for maybe reading or joining a book club or starting a hobby. So just remember, your intention is the why, and your intention is the commitment to a process and not just the destination that a goal provides. And the last thing I want us to get clear on is a plan. Now, your plan, this one is a very easy and simple definition. Your plan is how you're going to achieve the goal. So the plan is now defining what your journey is going to look like. It's breaking down that specific goal into smaller, more tangible things. So let's go back to the reading example. If you want to read a book a month, or maybe you want to read 2 books a month, you now have to break down that one goal into smaller goals. So that might mean reading for 30 minutes before bed or reading for 30 minutes in the morning. This might also mean you need to get to bed earlier. So if normally your lights out at 9 p.m., for example, if you want to fit 30 minutes of reading time in before bed, that might mean you should be in bed by 8:30, so you can get your 30 minutes in and you can have lights out at 9. In order for you to get to bed at 8:30, maybe that means you need to have dinner at 5, or you need to start your self-care routine before your usual time, just so you can make that extra time in. Maybe it means taking a shower earlier, doing your skincare routine, whatever it is you have going on. This is what you have to break down. This is your plan, and you have to break down your plan into multiple segments. So, quick recap on some definitions that I just outlined. First is the resolution. This is your broad decision. This is your decision on a future outcome. And the example we were using is, for the new year, I want to live my best life. It's just broad. It's completely broad. Now, how can you live your best life? What do you need to do to live your best life? This is going to be the goal. This is where you're getting really specific and you're defining your resolution. So now you're going to list everything that you need to do in order to live your best life. And because we're readers here, I hope reading is a part of you wanting to live your best life. So you could set a goal to read a book a month, or read 20 books a year like our friend Scarlett is planning to do. Or intention is the real reason behind why you want to set this goal. So sit with your goal and ask yourself, why do I want to achieve this? And if need be, ask yourself why multiple times. I often recommend that you put your goal through the 5 why test. So that's asking your first goal, why do I want to do this? And then ask why of your response until you get to something really deep and meaningful. And of course, the plan. The plan is your definition of your process and your journey. What do you need to do? Does this mean I need to get to bed at an earlier time? Let's define that. Let's get to bed at 8:30 so that we can read for 30 minutes and have lights out at 9. So the plan is the steps that you need to take in order to achieve your goal, and in time, achieve your greater resolution. And of course, along the way, we want you to enjoy the journey. So let's get clear about your intentions. Okay, so now that we've gotten clear on what these different words mean, I want us to get into the specifics of setting and achieving your reading goals. So if your goal is to read in the new year, read more books, or whatever that might be, let's get clear on what reading goals are. Now, reading goals are personal targets that you set for your reading life. Now, these can be whatever you want them to be, but the most important thing is that they challenge you, and in the end, you're better off for pursuing this goal. Now, why are reading goals important? Reading goals are important because they help you to focus on your reading. And when you set specific goals, you can now have something to achieve. Because without having a goal, it can be really, really easy to get sidetracked. And sometimes it might turn out that reading starts to feel like a chore. But when you set a goal, when you can pick books you know you will enjoy, that will also, in turn, help you to achieve your goals, you will be the better off for it. But no matter what your reading goals are, setting them is a great way to ensure that reading for you stays fun and engaging. Now, what are some easy reading goals, you might ask? Now, some easy reading goals could be, number 1, if you haven't read in some time now, it's to start a reading habit. That is a goal. You can also set a goal to read a specific number of books per month. You can set a goal to read a specific number of books per year. You can set a goal to read outside of your comfort zone, maybe explore different genres. You could set a goal to read books that were maybe on your high school or college reading list. You could make a list of classic books that you're interested in, that you want to read. Maybe make a list of some debut novels of the past maybe 5 or 10 years that you want to read. And if you're an avid reader and you're just eating and reading all the books, maybe you can set a goal to be a more intentional reader. Be mindful of the books you're selecting to read. Maybe look more at where you're getting your recommendations from, or look at why you might want to read a specific book. Is it something that you really want to read? Or is it a case where you're experiencing FOMO? And FOMO is an acronym for fear of missing out. So maybe it's a book that everyone else is reading and you feel this pressure to read this book. But regardless of what your goals are, I want you to really ask yourself why. Why do I want to read this book? And if you find that it's not something you're interested in, or it's not something you really want to read, I want you to give yourself permission to set that book aside, because life is really too short to read books that we really don't want to read. So usually when I pick up a book, I'm like, do I want to read this? Do I really want to read this? I'll ask myself those questions, and if my reaction isn't immediate, if it isn't yes, I'm not going to do it. Because it's really easy to get trapped in the bestseller list, celebrity book club picks, or just books we're seeing everyone reading on social media, or book tracking apps, whatever it might be. So if nothing else, also incorporate in whatever other goal you're setting, just to read books that you want to read and books that will give you joy. And there's nothing wrong with challenging yourself as well, because I think as readers, it is very important for us to challenge ourselves, but challenge yourself with a book that's of interest too. Now let's get into how to set reading goals. Now, step 1 is to define your reading goals or resolution. If you have a broad resolution of the books that you want to read, or the kinds of books you want to read, or how you want to challenge yourself as a reader, let's get very clear on that. And then once you've gotten to the goal level, get specific about those as well, because just simply saying, I want to incorporate reading into my life, I want to read more books, I want to read more intentionally, that isn't enough. So ask yourself, what kinds of books do you want to read? What does incorporating reading in my life look like? Do you want to set a numerical goal? If you do, say it, set it, write it down. If you want to read more diversely, what does that mean for you? So let's get very specific. What diverse stories or authors do you want to focus on? Just get really clear on what this might look for you. You might say, well, I want to read books from authors from the Harlem Renaissance, for example. Or you want to read books by authors or with main characters who are differently abled. Or maybe you want to read books from different countries to get different perspectives. Let's get very clear on what that looks for you. Step 2 is we need to make a plan to achieve your reading goal. Now, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, and I say this all the time, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. So now that we've defined our goals, you need to make a plan to achieve them. So how can you make plans to achieve your reading goals? Well, the first step I recommend is breaking them into smaller and more manageable tasks. So here's an example. If your goal is numerical and you want to read 12 books, you might set a goal to say, okay, in order for me to read 12 books in the year, I need to at least read 1 book a month. How can I read 1 book a month? Okay, we're breaking it down even more. This means I need to read for 30 minutes or maybe an hour every day in order to achieve this goal. If your numerical goal is larger, let's break this down into weekly goals. You could say, I want to read 50 books in this year. How can we break this down? We can break them down by week. There are 52 weeks in a year, but we want to read 50 books. So let's try to read 1 book a week in order to realize that goal. If that sounds unrealistic to you, because sometimes we do have grand goals, but if it sounds unrealistic, I want you to take a step back and revise your initial goal. So maybe 50 isn't the number for you. Maybe 30 is. And then you can say to yourself, okay, can I work with 30? Then you're like, no, I can't. So let's set a goal of 25. If we set a goal of 25 books, then all I need to do is read 1 book every 2 weeks. If that feels manageable for you, then that's a winner. Because I really want you to always remember that reading should be enjoyable. I don't want the end of the year to come around and for you to feel bad about not making your goal. And I especially don't want, at the end of the year, you getting in a frenzy to complete the goal and driving yourself mad. No. Reading should be enjoyable. We are focused on reading for pleasure, for joy, to learn new things, to have fun, to experience new experiences through the page. So I want this to be sustainable. Another thing you can consider is incorporating reading goals into your other personal goals. So for example, if you want to save money, if you want to exercise, if you want to spend more time with family, you can find creative ways to incorporate your reading goals into your other goals. For example, if you want to spend more time with your family, how about making reading a family activity? Maybe setting aside an hour a week for family reading time. This is where everyone breaks out their book that they are reading and we sit down and we read for an hour. That's a great activity for family reading time. Or maybe it could be reading aloud to each other. That could be great as well. If you're maybe wanting to incorporate more exercising, but you also want to get your reading in, maybe listening to audiobooks would be a great option for you as well. And let's remember, reading isn't limited to specific types of books. So maybe you want to learn a bit more about personal finance. So selecting a book about another goal is also something that could help you achieve two goals at the same time. So you're reading about personal finance to help your personal finance life and goals that you've set for yourself, but you're also reading at the same time. The same thing could be said about learning a new hobby. Maybe you want to take up photography. Maybe reading a book about photography could be incredibly helpful for you. So another thing to consider is incorporating your reading goals into your other personal goals. Some quick tips to help you stick to your goals. Maybe consider watching less television and being more mindful of your time on social media. If necessary, put some reading time in on your calendar, because I know sometimes life, meetings and other things tend to get in the way. So maybe if you add this to your calendar and you save this block of time for your reading, that could be helpful for you. I always recommend surrounding yourself with books and always having a book on hand. That way, when you find yourself with a bit of free time, you can crack your book open, get a few pages in, put your headphones in, grab your e-reader, whatever it might be. Just always have books and reading material around. Another tip to help you stick to your goal is maybe joining a book club, participating in a reading challenge, tune into podcasts, subscribe to newsletters, and follow websites that align with your goals. And I really hope that this podcast will help you, the Reader's Couch, subscribing to Biblio Lifestyle, joining our online community. I hope that by doing this, it can help encourage you and remind you to stick to your reading goals. Other things you can do to stick to your goals is, remember, read books that you want to read, not what you think you should be reading. And also, give yourself permission to stop reading if a book isn't working for you. Because if you force yourself through it, this might end up sending you into a reading slump, and you might now have negative associations with reading because the book you were previously reading was not a good fit. So I hope that some of these tips can help you make plans to achieve your reading goals. Okay, step 3 is to keep track of what you read. Now, I recognize that we're all in different stages of our relationship with reading, and the same thing can be said of keeping track of what you read. But I firmly believe that in order to get an accurate picture of your reading life, you need to keep track of the books that you're reading. Tracking your reading is also a great way to help ensure that you're making progress towards your goals and resolutions. Because I know it's really easy to just set a goal and say, okay, this is what I want to do. But if you're not keeping track of it, it's easy for you to go astray. It's easy for you to forget. It's easy to not know where you are currently. And it's easy for you to just throw that goal and your resolution just off in the wind and forget about it. And we don't want you to do that. We want you to achieve your goals that you've set for yourself. So a great way to do that is keep track of the books that you want to read. Personally, I love keeping track in a physical reading journal. Now, I have pre-printed reading journals that I use. I also just have a regular notebook that I've used in the past to keep track of my books. I've purchased bullet journals. I love keeping physical track. But I also recognize that reading apps are incredibly useful too. So if you add a book to your reading app each time you select a book to read and you keep track of your reading progress on the app, it can be a great way for you to see where you are on your journey, evaluate if you need to make changes to your goals, keep track of what you're reading, and of course, when you get to the finish line, it's easy to see that you've achieved your goal. So I really think tracking your reading is incredibly important in helping you to not just set your reading goals, but to help you achieve them as well. Okay, step 4 is I want you to reflect on your reading life. Now, this requires some introspection. This requires you to take a step back from what you're doing now or at points during your reading journey to step back and evaluate the books and reading methods that have worked for you. But it's also a great opportunity to recognize what's not working for you as well. So here's an example. If you set milestones where you take stock of what books and stories did and didn't work for you, let's say every month or every quarter, depending on what your reading goals look like, this reflection can then now help guide what kind of reading experience makes the most sense for you during that particular time in your life. So if you take a step back and you realize, okay, I've been consuming more books via my e-reader as opposed to physical books, that's a great indication that, okay, I need to load up my e-reader with more books because that's where I'm consuming most of my content. I'm not necessarily reading stories from physical books at this time. It doesn't mean you'll never buy physical books anymore or check books out from the library physically. It just means in this season of your life, your e-reader is your best friend. You might also recognize you listen to more audiobooks than anything else. So that can inform your decision accordingly. So if it's either of these two, that simply means physical books aren't working for you. So why spend the money on purchasing these physical books when you're actually listening or using your e-reader more? You might also find that the opposite is true. You're spending money on audiobooks, but in fact, based on your reading journal or based on the app you're using to keep track of your reading, you're recognizing you're consuming physical books more and you're not really using audiobooks. So maybe you need to cancel that audiobook subscription or that ebook subscription. So taking time to reflect to see what works for you is incredibly helpful. You might also notice a pattern with the stories that you're actually reading. You know, what stories are you enjoying more? Do you realize, wow, I really need more happily ever after stories in my life. I'm gravitating to more romance during this season in my life. Or I find myself loving coming of age stories. Or maybe you find yourself more attracted to gothic, suspenseful stories, or maybe paranormal stories, or whatever it might be. When you take that time to reflect, you'll notice patterns, and then you can now seek out those kinds of books because they are the ones that are giving you the most fulfilling, pleasurable, just a really overall happy reading experience. And we want to keep that momentum going. So now you know what kinds of books to select that will help you on your reading journey to stay consistent and achieve those reading goals. Now, I want to be very clear. Reflecting on your reading life doesn't have to be a long, extensive process. But again, it will help you see if you're achieving your reading goals, but it's also an indication of what is working for you in that given season of your life. And it's also a great opportunity to develop a better plan if your previous plans weren't working for you. So take that extra time to reflect on what you're reading. And our last step, step 5, is take action, because none of what we discuss here matters if you don't take action. So this is where I want you to put all of the steps we've discussed into action. I want you to start acting on them and work towards becoming the reader you want to be in order for you to achieve your reading goals. So, quick recap for our 5 steps to set and achieve your reading goals. Step 1, we want you to define your reading goals very clearly. You can have a broad reading resolution, but we want you to break them down into tangible goals. Get very specific about your goals. After you've gotten specific about what your goals are, we want you to make a plan to achieve them. Now, the first step I recommend is breaking those goals into smaller and more tangible tasks and see how realistic this might be to incorporate them in your life. Look at ways you can incorporate your reading goals into your other personal goals. Find different creative ways to incorporate reading into other activities. Also, don't forget, maybe you need to watch less television. Maybe you need to put reading time on your calendar if necessary. Always have some reading material on hand, whether it's your e-reader, your audio book listening app, having physical books in your bag, your car, your nightstand, just everywhere. Always have reading material. If necessary, join a community if you need that support. And remember, I'm here, the Biblio Lifestyle community is here, the podcast is here, and we have many different programming for readers at different levels. So, sign up and attend the ones that speak most to you. So after we've made a plan, we need to keep track of what we're reading, because this way we can get an accurate picture of our reading life. We can see where we are in our reading journey. We can see if we're making progress towards our goals. So a great way to see where you are and where you need to go is by keeping track. I highly recommend step 4, taking time to reflect on your reading life. Take a step back from what you're doing now. Look at the methods that are working for you. How are you consuming your books? And also take a look at the books that you've been reading that have been working for you. And if necessary, if your plans weren't working, use this as an opportunity to develop better plans in order for you to achieve your reading goals. And finally, I want you to take action, because again, you can listen to this podcast, you can read resources online. None of this matters if you don't take action. So the second you get off this podcast, start making plans, start setting those goals and getting clear on what reading might look like for you in the coming year and beyond. So readers, I really hope you found today's episode helpful and that you're ready to take action so you can set and achieve your reading goals. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to talking with you again soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.